Welcome to the Vancouver True Crime podcast. So in this episode, Vancouver the Beautiful and Ugly, Part 6. In the last episode of Vancouver Beautiful and Ugly, Part 5, I left off in early 2000s where I get a job in investor relations working for a stockbroker, but I'm going to rewind all the way back to 1990s. Because people love the 90s stories, they like the crazy dating stories, and they love the crazy Kevin stories. So in 1990, I worked at Chevron, 4th and McDonald at, it was called Tremblay Motors. And actually, Kevin got me the job. He was working there already, and then he got me the job, and we worked there together. We had a lot of fun together. So Kevin was as you know, if you've listened to this series, he was one of my best friends I went to high school with, very eccentric, super athletic, had a split personality, a demon, and the most charming guy you've ever met. And so we had a lot of fun. We'd go to Darby's pub across the street, have beers after work. We'd go to the beach before our jobs, and we'd go to Wreck Beach a lot, and we'd go to Kits Beach. It was a fun time, fun neighborhood. Kitsilano was a lot of fun back then. So one day, Kevin used to like to try to get women's numbers when they would pull in. He'd hit on them. And what he would always say to them, and he'd give them some kind of compliment, some kind of sincere compliment, like their outfit looked nice or their hair looked nice. And some type of complimentary thing. And some women would just smile, and some women would, hey, get out of the car and start talking to him. And next thing you know, we had a number, right? So one day I thought I would try my luck. And this woman comes in with this Jaguar, beautiful car. Beautiful. It was like those old school Jaguars, the double tank, V12 motor. And, again, this is a full-service gas station. I'm checking her tires, wash the windows, go in and check the oil, full tank of gas, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes the car would be there for a little bit while he did everything. And this woman was, wearing a very nice suit and heels and blouse, and she had, looked like she had a very expensive haircut. So I thought I'd, try my luck. And I said to her, I go, wow, your hair looks absolutely amazing. Did you just get it done? And holy moly, she jumps out of the car and she starts talking to me like, yo, yes, and da-da-da-da. And she's just talking away at me. And I'm thinking, wow, like this, again, I was like 18 years old. And I'm thinking, wow, I found the secret. I found the secret of how to get women. And this woman was a lot older than me. She was probably in about 35. I was 18 years old. Now, she goes in her purse. Looks like a very expensive purse. And she goes in her wallet, and she pulls out a very crisp business card. Gives me her business card. I'm just in awe, right? I have this business card from this very attractive woman who's well dressed and drives a Jaguar. And I'm thinking, wow, this is this is almost too easy. This is going to be like shooting fish in the barrel if I keep this up all summer. So she said, oh, you should give me a call sometime. We'll get together. I'm thinking, when a woman, especially when you're 18 years old, when a woman says, we will get together, wow, you can imagine what's going on in my mind. So I worked till about 6 o'clock. I literally went home as fast as possible. So at this time, I was living on Granville and 12th. It's a white tower apartment. It's actually still there. I drove by it the other day, saw it. And it was, I get home as fast as possible. And first thing I do is I give this lady a call. Hey, it's Mark. I met you at the gas station today. I thought I'd give you a call. She goes, oh, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. Why don't you come over? And I'm thinking, wow, come over? Sure. I put on I put on some tight jeans, a tight t-shirt. I probably did some push-ups, shower, of course, put some product in my hair, some cologne. And she lived on Cornwall Street, which is right by where Kit's Beach is. And it's, a pretty nice area. And she says, I live on Cornwall, gives me her address. And so, well, when should I come over? She goes, why don't you come over right now? And literally, I couldn't get there fast enough. I think I rode my mountain bike, to get to her place. I blasted down the hill. I think as soon as I hung up the phone, within 25 minutes, I was buzzing her apartment. And, I'm thinking, wow, this woman's really into me. It's going to be amazing. My mind is, going in all kinds of places, right? So I get up there. I think she's on the 3rd floor. Really nice apartment, really nicely decorated, expensive furniture, expensive pictures. This woman looks like she has money. But something's not quite right. Something just seems a little off. There's a whiteboard set up in her living room, and I'm just looking at the whiteboard. I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't seem like, doesn't seem like it's going to be like, I don't know. Something about that doesn't seem right. So I sit in the living room. She asks, would you like anything? And, she offers tea or coffee. I'm like, sure, I'll have a coffee. I'm thinking more, a beer or wine would be better, but, coffee will be okay. And then she goes to the whiteboard and she starts writing down affiliate marketing stuff of how you can become rich selling Amway. And my heart just sank, and she's giving me this driest, boringest sales pitch. And I'm just thinking, how the hell do I get out of this? And so I'm just like, listen to the thing and just like, oh my God, it's a network marketing, wants me to sign me up for Amway and sell a bunch of stuff that you can buy at the grocery store. And I'm thinking, like, why would anyone buy this crap if you just buy it at the grocery store? And it's, but, you can get rich and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, so I was super disappointed. Well, she kept calling me after, right? So I was, dating some other girls, but we weren't like, no girl that I was really serious. There was no girl that was considered my girlfriend, but I was dating other girls. So finally, I asked this girl who was a little bit high-strung and say, hey, can you do me a solid? I got this crazy lady that wants me to be some kind of Amway rep, and she just won't leave me alone and stuff. Can you call her and just pretend you're like a jealous girlfriend and freak out on her? So I had this girl call her and totally lose her shit, pretending that she was some jealous chick, and so I scared her away. So I always thought that was a funny story because, it's just so typical of my luck, right? That's just I don't know, kind of a typical story for me. As life went on, I had. So across the street was Darby's Pub, and that was kind of like our spot that we'd go to after work, sometimes at lunch hour, and have a lot of fun, a lot of memories in that pub around that time. So another person who worked at this gas station was this guy. He was from London, Ontario. Really nice guy, really smart guy, had a lot of academic background. This is like back in the 90s, so computers weren't what they are today, especially then. And he was really into computers, and that was rare back then because there was desktop computers, but there was no internet like there was now. I think the internet they had, you had actually have an actual phone modem and do these dial-up stuff, but it wasn't as common of having a computer at home like it is today. So he was really into computers, which was kind of, a thing that stood out back then because this is like in the 90s. And he moved here with his girlfriend. Very attractive woman. They kind of almost looked alike because they were both German, but they were Canadian, but, they didn't have accents or anything, but both their backgrounds were German. So they both were blonde and, good bodies, both into fitness and both, very well dressed and nice people. Well, he was, but the girlfriend wasn't. So this is a scenario that I've seen a lot of times in Vancouver. Because again, Vancouver is a place where a lot of people move to. A lot of people come here because it represents some kind of idea, a fresh start, a new beginning, and away from their old life. And also, too, away from their families. I've known a lot of people from Montreal and Quebec and parts of Ontario, Alberta, even the Maritimes, the prairies. They would come here because, maybe they're not really getting along with their families, or maybe they're the black sheep of the family, or maybe they just want to party and have some fun, but they don't want the families knowing every little thing they're doing. So, Vancouver represented a place of freedom. And so in this case, his girlfriend, as I said, she was a pretty attractive woman. And she asked him, hey, would you want to move to Vancouver? They were apparently high school sweethearts all through grade 8 to grade 12, the high school prom and all that kind of stuff. And I think he had about 3 or 4 years of university, and, they lived together through the whole time, right? They've been a couple apparently since grade 8. So for the last 2 years, she really got on his case. Let's go to Vancouver. We're going to start all over, and our families won't be around. We can be free and blah, 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 and it's going to be fun and all that kind of stuff, right? So he actually had a good job in London, Ontario. I think he was working for some government organization, some kind of statistics or something like that. He explained it to me, but it went 1 year out the other. Wasn't really into that kind of stuff back then. But anyways, he was a smart guy. And so this is something I've seen a lot, where the woman, it's usually the case of this, where the woman tells the boyfriend or husband, they want to move to Vancouver. It's all their idea, right? Boyfriend or husband finally agrees. He disrupts his whole life. He quits his job. He takes her, moves her out to Vancouver. So in this case, this two couple from London, Ontario, moves all the way to Vancouver. He gets a pretty nice apartment downtown Vancouver. Sets her up. She's not working. He can't get a job right away, doing what he normally does. So he gets a job at Tremblay Motors, working with me, pumping gas, right? But he did a good job. He was humble. He didn't have an attitude. I actually enjoyed working with him. I actually thought he was a good guy. Well, one day, as usual, we go for beers across, the street to Darby's pub. And he goes, oh, do you want to meet my girlfriend? She's going to come meet us. She comes over and sees me and Kevin, and holy Christ, every time that guy went to the bathroom, went to the bar to grab something, this woman would literally jump on our laps and grab us because, we're both into working out. She just started, even under the table, she's playing footsies with us. She sat in between us, and this guy just looks horrified. She's like all over, sitting on my lap, sitting on Kevin's lap, playing touchy-feely under the table. And we and Kevin are like, oh my God. And Kevin just thinks it's hilarious, right? And so this guy just starts getting heartbroken because now she wants to date other dudes. Like, she just told him straight up. Actually, again, I've seen this before. It's not the first time I've seen this, but this is probably the first time I saw it because, I was 18 at the time. So she wants to date other dudes. He's sleeping on the couch in the apartment he's paying for, and she's going on dates with other dudes. And finally, he mans up and kicks her out, and eventually got a good job and got on his feet. And I think he started working for the fisheries, doing some kind of, data analysis with his computer training and stuff. But there was another guy. There was a guy from Alberta. Same thing, same story. Working at the gas station with myself. Moved out here from Calgary because his girlfriend thought it would be a great idea to move to Vancouver. Soon as they get here, soon as she gets comfortable, she breaks up with him, starts dating other dudes. He had I remember one time, and they're just freshly broken up. And he's having a little party, and they're still on that terms where they're still talking and da-da-da-da. And right in front of him, she says, because my favorite nightclub back then was Love Affair. And I was talking about it, and there was like this one night I used to always go to, it was the British Industrial Night and stuff. She goes, oh, I'd love to do E with you, and and go hang out with you and go to love affair with you. And I'm just looking at the guy. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, well, it's up to him. I point to him and say, but we're not dating anymore. And I'm just like, oh my God. This guy was always a total jerk to me ever since. He was one of those guys that pretended to be your friend, but behind your back, every chance he would try to say something to make you look bad, or one of those, kind of a piece of shit. But I kind of got it. His feelings were hurt. So, that was that. So this little gas station was funny because it had all these characters, that were restarting life. For me, it was one of my first jobs, but there was a lot of people that worked there that were either in between careers. But the biggest loser was this guy. His name was, oh God, maybe I shouldn't say his name, but he was an older guy. He was like in his 50s or 60s. And I hated this guy because he was such a pompous, and he'd always talk about all these inventions, and he was some kind of geologist that made all this money. He was worth he made all these millions of dollars. I'm like, but dude, you're like 50 and you work at a gas station. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think he was delusional or something, because I remember one day on his day off, he shows up pretending, because he drives in because he's pretending that he needed gas, but I don't think he really needed gas, but he wanted to show off because he was wearing a suit, because it was part of his story, of his whole facade of he's inventing this new invention that's top secret that's going to make him hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever BS that's in his head. But then he got out and we all started laughing because he's wearing a suit jacket. He's wearing a tie and a dress shirt, but he's wearing the chevron pants for the bottoms. And we saw them. We started laughing. Like, did you really show up at your big business meeting wearing the chevron pants? And, kind of embarrassed him, right? So again, it was a funny place, right? Kevin would go kind of nuts. He ended up getting fired from the job because he did some pretty effed up things there. He got into an argument with some lady that gave him an attitude, and he filled up her tires to like 100 pounds of pressure, which is pretty psycho. And then one day it was really hot. This is probably one of the craziest things I've seen Kevin ever do. And if you want to know who Kevin is, and if you're first time listening, you got to listen to the other ones, because Kevin was pretty nutty. If you're follow me on my Instagram page, I'll post some Kevin pictures on my story so you can get a feel for what he's like. I just don't want to have to repeat everything for the listeners that already know who Kevin is. So Kevin was very muscular. He was my bodybuilding gym partner. We worked out like men. So Kevin thought it was a wonderful idea to smoke like a gram of hash before his shift at the gas station. So he was really lethargic. He looked baked. And it was extremely hot because this was like August. It was really hot. And he was tanning a lot because he used to go to the beach a lot and he'd get quite dark, but his face was starting to get burned. So to remedy this, and remember, this is a full service gas station, hundreds of cars in Broadway, 4th and McDonald, really busy area back then. It's dead now, but that's a whole different story. But back then it was a really busy spot. Very busy neighborhood back then. So he takes a paper towel from the bathroom, in the gas station bathroom, takes a paper towel, and he cuts a hole for the eyes and it cuts a hole for the mouth, and he wears it like a mask and tapes it around his head. And then through the hole in his mouth, he has a big giant bag of cheesies that he's stuffing these cheesies, because I guess he has the munchies from smoking all the hash, and he's stuffing these cheesies into the hole of the mask, of the paper towel mask that he made, so he doesn't get the sun on his face. And customers are just looking at him like he's like this guy out of the mental hospital, this orange, cheesy stains around the mouth. And finally the boss just said, Kevin, you got to go home. We can't have that. And I think he got fired for that. But total crazy. This went on for about half an hour before anyone noticed. And people, the cars were just like, they looked at him like he was some kind of mental patient, right? So it's kind of a funny story. So there was a kind of a sad story that I kind of remember too, that I want to talk about too. So we used to always get our weed down at Wreck Beach, and back then, I was really into mountain biking. I tried to ride my mountain bike my goal was to try to do 10 miles a day at minimum, and sometimes I did more. So I'd ride my bike from work. I lived on Granville and Broadway 12th, kind of like 12th and 12th and Granville. I'd go all the way down Broadway and then zip down to 4th and McDonald, right? I'd ride a lot down to UBC. I'd do like the trails, the endowment trails, kind of where Spanish Banks is, the Spirit Park. I'd do the trails. And then I'd always stop off at Wreck Beach, run down the stairs carrying my bike and buy some weed. And I'd always buy it off the same guy. And he was like kind of a very slim guy. He'd always wear sunglasses. He was very short. I think he was probably 130 pounds. Very nice, very soft-spoken. You can gentle soul. A real, like, gentle, sweet soul. And he was probably, God, maybe 5'6". Very harmless. A guy that, you couldn't harm a fly. And like I said, I became, friends with him. And then one day, this guy shows up at the gas station. And I can't remember his name, so let's just call him Jeremy. Because he looked like a Jeremy, if that made sense. And he's like, hey, I got some bad news. I'm like, well, what's going on? And he introduced me. He goes, oh, I'm friends with Jeremy. And I go, well, what's going on? He goes, he killed himself. He committed suicide. I'm like, really? Like, he just seemed like so happy and laid back and chill. And, he sold a lot of weed. He must have been making decent money because, he was always busy. And when he came by, he would come by our gas station, like, at least every other day, and he'd sell quite a bit. But I guess, it's not just the money. And I said, well, why did he kill himself? He said he just couldn't handle life. He just hated the society, hated how everything was. He just didn't feel like he fit in and stuff. And that was the first person I've ever known that committed suicide, and very sad. And I wish I knew him a little better. And maybe, who knows, right? You don't know what's always going on. You don't know someone's history, but you wish you could have helped, right? Because he seemed like a nice person. I don't know. I thought of that story today because I was thinking of stories around that time and stuff, and very sad, very sad. So I left that apartment. It was on Granville. And, the landlord was a real loser. Like, I couldn't imagine having a landlord like this. A lot of the apartments, I don't know if it's like this. I haven't rented an apartment in, God, I can't remember last time I rented an apartment. Probably 15 plus years ago. But back then, there usually was like some type of property manager that lived on the premise. And of all the places I've ever lived on, this guy was possibly the most obnoxious landlord or manager. Like, he couldn't pull the shit that he did back then. He would pound on your door like at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, obviously a few drinks in him, like 3-4 days before rent day, demanding rent, like just demanding, like total a-hole. And when I first moved there, when I first lived there, I had a girlfriend from high school, and she was studying to be a legal secretary. So she actually had a computer. Back then, they called it a word processor. She needed it for her studies. So, the relationship didn't really, we only lived together for about 6 months, and then she moved out. We separated, but I kept the apartment for a little bit. And I remember she got this computer and just setting it up. And this clown knocks on the door. Like, it's funny because now, if I had a guy do that, I'd treat him very different back. But back then, I'm 18 years old. You don't really know what to do about these situations without escalating and it turning physical. Because, back then, I didn't have the same, abilities that I do now, right? So I just kind of kept my mouth shut because I didn't really know how to handle this guy. So this guy just walks in our apartment, sits down in front of the computer and starts going through and says, oh, you don't need this, you don't need that, and just starts deleting stuff. And I was just like, whoa. Now I just grab him by the scruff of the neck and just toss him. But, it was kind of freaked out. But this guy was a bit of a loser, so that's one of the reasons why I left. So I was looking for a new place, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and he goes, oh, my aunt has a place. You could live with her. It's a really good deal. And I said, well, what's it like? He goes, oh, it's a basement suite. I'm like, oh, I'm just thinking, I don't want to live in there. He goes, no, trust me. This is not your typical basement suite. When you see it, you'll understand. So he gave me the address, and it was like in a very ritzy area. It was on 25th and Selkirk, which is kind of like King Edward Street, but in Shaughnessy, like where all the mansions are. So I went, wow, and the house was massive. 9-bedroom house, huge, beautiful stone. The husband was a banker who did very well, and he died, and his aunt was a widower, and she lived there only with this massive mansion, and she lived there only with her disabled son, who was an adult. And you'd hear him, he'd have these tantrums. It was quite sad. I felt bad for her. She was a really nice lady. And so I met her, and we hit it off really well. She seemed to really like me, and she showed me the suite, and it was massive, like the whole basement. There was a roommate there, but it was so big that you're kind of glad there was a roommate there, because it was like, you'd be in this massive house by yourself. So the basement suite was huge. It actually had 2 kitchens, it had 4 fireplaces, and it had 3 bedrooms. It was massive, probably one of the biggest places I've ever lived in. And the roommate was a very strange dude. Very nice, extremely nice. He was from Saskatchewan. He moved here from Regina. And probably one of the hardest working dudes I've ever met in my life. So when he first moved to Vancouver, just like a lot of people, he got caught up in stuff. He got into drinking, he started doing drugs, and with his background, it really weighed on his soul heavily. He, never did that back home, but he got caught up in something. So one day, he went to he didn't know, I guess it was like some kind of workshop about addiction. I think it's called Narconon, and it's run by Scientology. And they got him. They got their hooks in him. So what they do is they put you through a bunch of saunas, and I love saunas. I go to, well, this is before COVID. I haven't had a sauna since COVID, but it's a really good detox, or it does work. Going in the sauna is very healthy for you. It have a lot of health benefits. So if Narconon, which is a Scientology, but they don't tell you it's Scientology until you're, later on, right? But the other thing they do is they give you vitamin B3. Now, a little, not trying to say you should do this, but I'm just saying, if you wanted to get off work early or get out of school a little early, if you buy vitamin B3, what it does is makes your skin look really flushed and blotchy, especially if you take it in large doses. You look terrible. You look like for me, when I take it, I look like a bright red beet, and it's blotchy, and you look weird, and you can say, oh my God, I think I'm coming down with something. And trust me, they'll just tell you to go the F home. But then if you take an aspirin right after, it diminishes its side effects. So I knew about niacin for a long time because I was into bodybuilding and vitamins, and that's all me and Kevin did. So I knew the niacin trick, even then. And so he told me this when I finally met the roommate. He was totally into Scientology. He had this massive bookshelf. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of books and tapes and, courses that he spent. Probably at that time, we're talking early 1990s, he's probably spent close to $50,000 on all these courses. And this is what he said. He goes, oh, they gave me some vitamins, and I started to get all blotchy, and they told me that's all the drugs coming out of your system, all the drugs that you've done. And I'm thinking, oh my God. He's like, what a bunch of bullshit. So anyways, he was never there because he was either working, because he worked 2 full-time jobs. He worked one job where he worked 10-hour days in a woodworking shop for 10 hours, 4 days a week. And then on the other days, he worked 12 hours at another job as a roofer, did roofing. And then when he was free in the evening times, he did his Scientology courses. But because the Scientology courses were so expensive, he literally needed these 2 jobs to pay for the Scientology course. Oh, one thing I forgot to add. So this basement suite in this mansion in Shaughnessy in 1990 was a whopping $300. It was what this lady charged me. So amazing deal. So I had this massive place to myself, rarely saw this guy, and I was interested in the Scientology. I heard a little bit about it before. I didn't really know a lot about it. So I started reading. I was always a very avid reader. I started reading his books. Total insane stuff. So I got a real inside look into Scientology, the courses that they sell these people, how they trick them, and these courses are literally nonsense. It's basically L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. He has the Guinness Books of World Record for the most science fiction titles. Because back in the 50s, during the pulp fiction days, he would write these books, and they basically would pay him a penny a word. So he would actually get a big butcher roll paper, for wrapping meat. He would stick it in the typewriter, and he would just crank out nonsense, by the shitload. And then, to make a long story short, someone said, if you start a religion, that's how you become rich. And he made Scientology was actually a philosophy first. It was kind of like he took stuff from cognitive therapy and talk therapy and things like that. And then it was seen as like more of a philosophy or psychology help, even though they hate psychologists and stuff. But that's a whole different story. And then later on, he made it into a religion to get the tax exempt status. I'm not going to really go deep diving into Scientology yet, but that's for another episode, because I am fascinated by cults and stuff. So this poor guy, he was a nice guy, a lost soul in Vancouver, got steered the wrong way, got into boozing, got into drugs, felt horrible about it because it wasn't him. And then Scientology got this hooks into him, and now he's working like a slave, giving them every penny, and taking these ridiculous courses. Because I remember I asked him, like, "Oh, what do you want to do? Like, well, what do you want to do?" And he goes, "Oh, I want to take business courses and blah blah blah." Because I think he eventually wanted to have his own roofing company. So I said, "Why don't you take business courses?" And he looked at me with this crazy blank look, with not blinking, saying, "Scientology's better." And I said, "Wow, they got you, dude. They got you." So one funny story at this beautiful mansion was, I was off and on with my girlfriend from high school, and I won't say her name in case she's around. And let's call her Betty. She kind of looks like a Betty. And Betty comes over, show off the fireplace. No one's home. Have a big roaring fire. We're on the couch in front of the fireplace. One thing led to another. Start going at it. Had a little fun on the couch in front of the fireplace. And the next day, the landlady who lived upstairs was a very nice lady, older lady, and she would invite me up for tea. She seemed to really take a shine to me, and we'd go and have tea and those little cookies. Have these little cookies with jam and stuff in the middle, and the peak freen cookies. She always had those, and we'd have tea and have our peak freen cookies, and she would chat. We'd chat about stuff. And then one day she says, like, this is the day before. So the night before I had Betty over. And there was this guy that was friends with my roommate. They were like inseparable. They were like his best friend. And it's so funny because they looked alike. The roommate was tall, probably about 6 foot, very slim. I'd say maybe about 170. And he was blonde and he had a mustache. And this guy looked just like him, but he was dark-haired and had a mustache, same build. And they seemed a little inseparable. Don't know what the status of the relationship was, didn't care. I was just happy that I have roommates that are never around, right? Barely ever saw him. And that lady looks at me all seriously, and I'm drinking tea, and I almost spat it out on her and spat all over the table. She goes, I think those two. And I remember the guy's name was Tibor. She goes, "Oh, I don't like that Tibor guy. I don't like him." She goes, I hear them last night. They were making hanky-panky. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that was, I'm thinking in my head, that was me. And she thought it was them totally going at it. I guess with all the fireplaces and stuff, all the sound would just travel up to where she was. But she thought it was them doing it, which is kind of hilarious, right? So anyways, I didn't stay there for very long. I ended up moving out. I remember living somewhere closer to Kitts Beach. I moved down back to Kitts Beach, and then I want to talk about, because again, I want to talk about these strange, kind of cult experiences. I was thinking about, Scientology. This is my first introduction to Scientology, and like I said, I got this real inside view of all the crazy material and the courses, and it's a real shame because, this guy was a really nice guy, and the amount of money, I hope, one day this guy probably woke up and said, I've paid all this money and worked my ass off. Imagine working 2 full-time labor jobs just to give it to this garbage, this science fiction garbage. Because if you read the books that It's complete bullshit. So the funny part was that him and this Tibor guy ended up moving in together. They ended up getting their own apartment together. But they're both into Scientology. And I know Scientology really frowns upon homosexuality. So I think they were gay, but they were suppressing it because of Scientology. But they were inseparable. Every chance they got together on their free time, they were pretty close. So I hope that they work their stuff out, and I hope they can live free and openly without the scrutiny of Scientology of making them feel like horrible people that they shouldn't have to feel like. So I want to talk about this crazy cult experience I had. This is around the same timeline. I was walking around Broadway and Granville area, and I think I was in a bookstore around that area. And I walk out, and there was this guy, and I remember it was warm out. It wasn't hot summer yet, but it was warm. And the first thing I noticed, this guy was wearing a suit. And I thought, wow, he must be uncomfortable in that suit, because it was probably 23, 24 degrees. Not scorching hot, but definitely not wearing a suit weather. And the woman was wearing this big kind of florally dress, they looked kind of overdressed, because one of the things I hear a lot about, and I totally agree with this because I traveled around the different cities, is how underdressed people are in Vancouver. You go to some expensive steakhouse, you go to the Keg, go some high fancy place, and you see people wearing sweatpants. And especially cities back east, they don't play that, especially New York and Montreal and even Toronto. You dress up if you're going somewhere nice. Well, Vancouver is very different. So seeing people really dressed up for not really a special occasion is kind of, typically in Vancouver, it stands out. So this guy came up to me, and he would say he looked like he was a quarter black, not even half. He was very light skinned. He was, kind of handsome. He had curly hair. He had greenish eyes. But there was this very pompous, I picked up this very pompous kind of mannerisms. And he came up to me, introduced himself, shook my hand. And remember, I just don't even know him. I'm like, hi. I'm like, what can I do for you? He goes, hey, do you want to hear? He started talking about some church stuff, right? And a little voice in my head was, first I'm going to tell him this to fuck off, right? But then I was a little bit curious. I don't know, a little curiosity. They say curiosity kills the cat. He asked me if I wanted to go to a Bible study. I say, hey, why not? I don't know, something about him made me curious. I don't know. So that Sunday, he calls me, ready to picks me up. He had a pretty nice car. There was some other people in there. If memory serves me correctly, I think he drove a Cadillac, but kind of one of those old school Cadillacs, almost my grandpa would drive, those big Cadillac, Fleetwoods, It was nice. It was kept, it was polished. It was cleaned up nice, but it was a bit older, but it was in good condition. But, that stood out a little bit. He's this young guy. He was the same age as me. He was 18, 19, wearing a suit, driving, looks like grandpa's Cadillac. So we drive, and this place, they don't even have a church, but they operate out of a convention center. I think it was a Coast Plaza, kind of near Stanley Park. And we drive up there, and the same thing. His wife's there, she was kind of a bigger woman, but she was attractive. I don't remember her saying anything. If all my memories of her, she never, she would say hi and stuff like that, but she wasn't talkative. She was always silent, and he did all the talking. So we drive to this hotel, go into the convention center, and it's packed. It is absolutely packed. And the weirdest thing happened to me, but I forgot to say one thing. So I knew I was going to this kind of potentially strange situation I was going to walk into. And before I showered, because I didn't want to reek like weed, I smoked the fattest joint, just one the size of my index finger, and showered, Visine in the eyes, a little bit clone, dressed up, right? Because I knew it was going to be a church service. I get to the hotel convention room. There's about 100 people there. It's packed. They must have knew I was coming, because this was weird. One of the strangest situations I've ever had in my life. All the women separate, and they mob you. Later, I found out this is called love bombing. This is a common cult technique, where if it's a woman, they'll get like, maybe the best looking guy to really charm her. But if it's a dude, all the girls come, and oh my God, these girls come out of nowhere. They're all around me. Oh, you're into bodybuilding. They're all feeling my muscles and rubbing my back. And one chick, she was, kind of big boobs and, kind of a very hourglass figure, very attractive, stuffs a number in my pocket, which I ended up calling her, and it turned out she was quite a dirty girl and did some dirty stuff with her after. And but they it's almost like they unleashed their women on me. It was really weird. It kind of freaked me out. So I'm sitting there, and I sit down. I'm sitting beside this guy. And the other thing about him too, see, he's kept going on and on about how he's from Jamaica, but he had no accent. And I know a lot of Jamaican guys, right? He did not come across like the typical Jamaican guys. Most Jamaican guys I know are, I love them. They're characters. Each one has their own individual character. And he was not like a Jamaican guys that I grew up with. This guy, and he would go on about how in Jamaica he had this place with servants. And so I started to think this guy's an asshole, right? And, but he'd always go on and on about, how rich he was in Jamaica and stuff. And I always found it strange because there was like zero accent, but they were all of them. This is the strange part. All of them were from Toronto. That's why they didn't have a church. And as I get in the story, I'll break down why this church. So they were more of a cult than like a Christian church. But anyway, so crazy love bombing, they unleash one of their craziest, sluttiest women on me. And she, again, I phone her, she comes over, and this, God, this woman was like insane, right? And I think I ended up screwing her like for an entire night one night. And, crazy chicks, right? And I'm thinking like, this is a church, right? But this is how they're trying to get you. This is how they're trying to get you, right? So I sit through the service, right? And I've been to, like, in the States and stuff, I've been to a lot of like evangelical types of congregations, and it's a little bit relaxed. So, my background is actually more Catholic, when I was a child. And so very different, they have a rock band, and I felt like the minister or whatever who was trying too hard to be cool. He had an earring, he played electric guitar, he kind of reminded me like David Koresh type, and he was a cult leader, right? And this is where it gets weird, right? So he's just a typical service and playing the guitar and how much he loves Jesus and all that kind of stuff, right? But then he starts getting really dark, and he starts going on and on and on. Like, we're talking about half an hour of the service was dedicated the evils of homosexuality. I'm just thinking, you're in the closet, you wouldn't put this much effort, why do you care? And he's going on and on and on and on and on, right? And I thought that was weird. And then he comes up to me afterwards, shakes my hand, he goes, "Oh, I heard you're into bodybuilding." I'm like, yeah, whatever. I work out. I'm not trying to make a big deal, but it's not like I'm there and no shirt on flexing or anything, right? Yeah, I say I like working out. Oh, that. Then he looks at me and goes, "Oh, that's too bad." I'm just almost like, fuck you. It's almost like you're a piece of shit, right? So I already know I don't like these motherfuckers, and I'm thinking, how do I get, I'm not, these people suck. So after they have this Bible study, right? And it's at this guy's apartment. So again, he drives a grandpa's Cadillac, going on and on in the car ride to the convention, how rich he was in Jamaica and all these servants and blah, blah, blah. Real uppity guy, right? So when I go to his apartment, I'm expecting, the Taj Mahal, right? God, the apartment. He had a real shitty apartment, like a really shitty apartment. And now I actually remembered something. The wife actually worked at Starbucks. That's right. The wife worked at Starbucks. And then he was trying to be a minister or something with this stupid fake culty church. Anyways, we have this Bible study, and I'm just, I'm kind of checking out now, and the fun is over, the novelty's over, right? The only thing I care about is this crazy chick gave me a number, and she definitely, gave me that was the only silver lining, the super attractive woman that stuffed a number in my pocket that basically really emphasized to call her, right? So that's the only thing I got out of it, and that's the only thing. But anyways, we're at this Bible study, And so I brought up the gay shit that they seem to be so against. And I said to him, I go, what if, someone is born that way? And oh my God, as soon as I started poking that, they started going off and da-da-da-da. And how it's evil and blah, blah, blah. And I says, but why do you guys care? Like, seriously, why do you guys care? Because, again, I live, in Vancouver. People are pretty accepting of it. And it was never seen as a big deal, right? If that's what people want to do, why should you give a shit? Like, honestly, why should you give a shit? But they seem to give a shit, right? So I was just curious of why they gave a shit. And oh my God, it just turned venom. And finally, he's getting so flustered at me, right? And I guess he heard me say shit and fuck a few times. And he starts saying to me, Mark, man, you swear a lot, and it's not cool. It's not fucking cool. Well, he didn't swear. It's not cool. I'm like, oh, and I said, oh, that fucking sucks. So I left, right? And, they called me, and the chicks would call me. And the only chick I called was that chick gave me her number. I think I got together about 5 or 6 times. Until that got bored of that, because she was kind of crazy, and I think she was there to help the recruitment, if that makes sense, right? So I stopped that. So over the next month, they called and called and called, and they're trying to appeal to, I guess, my macho-ness. So now he's trying to be a bro now. He's not being Mr. Pompous, uppity, Mr. from Jamaica with servants and all that bullshit. Now he's trying to be a bro. Hey, man, he called. These are the messages I'm getting on my answering machine, because back then you had an answering machine. Hey, man, I got some Bruce Lee movies and a 6-pack. Are you coming over, man? And I'm just like, I always ignored them. And they would even ring my buzzer. And so anyways, watching the 6 o'clock news, they start talking about this culty church, and it was from Toronto, and how they are a cult, and they try to recruit people, and then they send them to other cities, and they try to send you to another city to get it started, and they really they use really aggressive type of money raising. So if you work, they say, this guy, now I know why he had such a shitty apartment, because basically when you work, you got to give him half of everything that you make. So think about this. If you got, let's say, 100 people, and let's say they're all making, let's say, $2,000-$3,000 a month, and they're giving you half, you get the idea, right? So this is what the real thing about this church was, is this asshole with the earring, with the guitar, acting all tough, That's what it was a money-making enterprise where they suck people in, they look for people that are lost, and in my case, they thought girls would work. They, sick the girl with the biggest boobs on me, and trying to get their hooks in you. And eventually, I think they got chased out of town because this news report exposed them for being cult. There was all these complaints about them. And yeah, it was really messed up. It's really messed up. So, again, this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, right? From people, who are kind of lost, and they use trickery to get you to do something. The lady with the beautiful Jaguar, instead of just saying, I thought she was interested in me, right? I thought, ooh, I'm going to hook up with this older lady, this rich, sophisticated lady, this poor guy getting sucked into Scientology, and then this church situation. For me, it didn't work. I was just curious, a little voice in my head. Just, I like interacting with people. I like interacting with people that are different than me. I like being an observer and stuff. And maybe this is why I have a podcast, is why I do these types of stories, and I'm interested in different stories and stuff. So this was a very strange experience for me. And then it was so funny. I actually ran into a bunch of the girls where I was actually down on Granville Street, and it was actually now kind of peak summer. And these girls came up to me, oh my God, we miss you when you're coming back to church, and da, da, da. Including that girl that I hooked up with a bunch of times with. And she's like, oh my God, she's actually looking and I can tell it's fake, right? She has this overacting, I miss you so much, please call me, and stuff like that. It's just, it was almost like you saw through the ruse, if that made sense, right? And they tried so hard. So I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for listening. And yesterday, I posted the podcast yesterday, my 2-year anniversary. it got some of the best numbers of any of my podcasts, like instantly. Like I posted it, and within 10 minutes, there was like 100 people listening to it, which is amazing. So I really appreciate you guys. You guys are so loyal. You're so awesome. The feedback's amazing. I'm going to work really hard to keep cranking out podcasts. I'm going to do as many as I possibly can because I really want to focus my energy and making more podcasts, making Vancouver True Crime more about the podcast and then the social media. And quite frankly, I need a little break from, the stuff that I explained in the last podcast. So really appreciate your support. You guys are amazing. I couldn't do it without you. I couldn't do it without your interest. And I'm so grateful that you are interested in my crazy story and my crazy life. So anyways, this is Vancouver, the Beautiful and Ugly, Part 6. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.